Hi, my name is Ashika and I'm presenting On the Screen by Edvard Munch. Edvard Munch was born in a rustic farmhouse in the village of Adisbruk, located in Loen, Norway, on December 12, 1863. Edvard Munch's mother died of tuberculosis in 1868 when he was at the age of 5, and 9 years later, his 15-year-old sister Joanne Sophie would follow. Edvard's father, Christian Munch, suffered of mental illness, and this affected the way that the rest of the family was raised. Christian Munch dedicatedly educated them on history and literature, amusing the kids with vibrant readings from Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of Terror. But when the children misbehaved, Christian would lash out verbally. The Poe stories, as well as his father's dark tendencies, would shape Edvard's psyche and art. Edvard once wrote, "My father was temperamentally nervous and obsessively religious, to the point of psychoneurosis. From him, I inherited the seeds of madness. The angels of fear, sorrow, and death stood by my side since the day I was born." In 1885, Edvard Munch traveled to Paris and was extremely influenced by the Impressionism artists Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, and followed by the Post-Impressionism artists Vincent van Gogh, Paul Cézanne, and Paul Gauguin. The main style of Munch's work is Post-Impressionism. Post-Impressionism artists reacted against the naturalism of the Impressionists to explore color, line, and form, and the emotional response of the artist, a concern that led to the development of Expressionism and even more progressive modern art movements of the 20th century. Edvard Munch used art to express inner thoughts, feelings, and emotions instead, often by painting with bright, exaggerated colors and simple shapes. Many of his other masterpieces include The Sick Child, Death in the Sick Room, Vampire, Madonna, Anxiety, and countless others. Most of Edvard Munch's work relates to the themes of sickness, isolation, fear, and death. These emotions were depicted by the contrasting lines, darker colors, blocks of color, somber tones, and a concise and exaggerated form, which depicted the darker side of the art he was designing. He has described himself in a book written in 1900 as nearly going insane, like his sister Laura, who is committed to a mental institution during this time period as well. Personally, he discussed being pushed to his limits and going through a very dark moment in his life. Edvard Munch passed away on January 23, 1944, in a small town just outside of his hometown in Oslo. Upon his death, the works which he had created were not given to his family, but they were instead donated to the Norwegian government and were placed in museums, shows, and in various local public buildings in Norway. In fact, after his death, more than 1,000 paintings which Edvard Munch had created were donated to the government. A total of 15,400 prints, 4,500 drawings and watercolor art, and 6 sculptures which Edvard Munch had created were all turned over to the Oslo government and were used as display pieces in many locations. The Scream by Edvard Munch has become a universal icon, a metaphor of man's existential loneliness and angst. The painting has been referenced in everything from Home Alone to the horror movie Scream. There are actually 4 different original versions of the Scream that Edvard Munch created using different art mediums, including oil paints, tempera, and pastels. The Scream is part of a larger art collection series that Edvard Munch called the Frieze of Life. All of the 4 paintings are created on cardboard, with 2 belonging to the Munch Museum in Oslo, one of which was created with crayon in 1893, and the other with tempera and oil paints in 1910. Another is in private ownership and was created with pastel in 1895, but the one I will be focusing on is the 1893 painted version created using tempera, crayon, and oil, belonging to the National Museum of Art, Architecture, and Design in Oslo, Norway. This painting was painted at the end of the 19th century during a unique transitional period in art history, sometimes referred to as the fin du siècle. Its dimensions are 91 centimeters by 73.5 centimeters, or 36 inches by 28.9 inches. The scene of the scream was based on a real, actual place located on the hill of Ekeberg, Norway, on a path with a safety railing. The faint city and landscape represent the view of Oslo and the Oslo fjord. At the bottom of the Ekeberg hill was a madhouse where Edvard Munch's sister was kept, and nearby was also a slaughterhouse. Some other noticeable points about this painting include the harbor, steamships, top-hatted men, steeple, and roads. The harbor depicted is the innermost reaches of the Oslo fjord and the round hill of Hovendo Island, and they can be seen from the hill. The pair of the top-hatted men were Munch's friends who had left him behind while walking on the bridge. This image looks over the side of a road called Mosevien, and also nearby were the slaughterhouses and the sanitarium. By the end of the 19th century, steamships began to replace sailing vessels outside of Oslo, the principal Norwegian harbor, and the primary exports from the port of Britain were fish and timber. Iron, cotton, and coal were the primary imports from Britain. The steeple is most likely that of the Oslo Cathedral, then among the tallest buildings in the city, which was known as Christiania from 1624 to 1924. Some accounts describe that in those times you could actually hear the cries of animals being killed, as well as the cries of mentally disturbed patients in the distance. In this setting, Edvard Munch was likely inspired by screams that he actually heard in this area, combined with his personal inner turmoil. This painting was an expressionistic construction based on Munch's actual experience of a scream piercing through nature while on a walk, after his two companions, seen in the background, had left him. Fitting the fact that the sound must have been heard at a time when his mind was at an abnormal state, Munch renders it in a style which, if pushed to the extremes, can destroy human integrity. According to Munch's diaries, the idea and inspiration for the scream was very autobiographical, with the modern art painting's content closely based on a personal experience first recorded in an 1892 diary entry, which Munch later adapted into the scream painting, and finally, in 1895, a poem. Munch states, "I was walking down the road with two friends when the sun set. Suddenly, the sky turned as red as blood. I stopped and leaned against the fence, feeling unspeakably tired. Tongues of fire and blood stretched over the bluish-black fjord. My friends went on walking, while I lagged behind, shivering with fear. Then I heard the enormous infinite scream of nature." The scream could be interpreted as expressing the agony of the obliteration of human personality by this unifying force. In what he referred to as a soul painting, Edvard Munch reveals an honest and perhaps an even ugly glimpse of his inner troubles and feelings of anxiety, putting more importance on personal meaning than on technical skill or beauty.